What's going on, everybody? So, Longlegs was probably the most anticipated movie in 2024, and it did not disappoint. So many moving pieces were present for this film, and luckily, all of it was to the benefit of the experience of the movie. The marketing was so reminiscent of the early 2000s, with like the phone number that you could call, or like the old school website that you could kind of piece together and it would hint and also lead into the movie. These were all just really cool gimmicks, and it reminded me so much of the Dark Knight's marketing, where you could hear the Joker and stuff. And obviously it's not as interactive as it was, but it was still really cool and it was on brand for the film. The film itself is absolutely coated in an unnatural malevolent energy. It's unsettling to say the least. The tone of the movie is surprisingly funny, scary, and extremely bleak, and the performances left me speechless. Micah Monroe and Nicolas Cage put in all-star performances. Micah Monroe's character Lee is very stoic and meticulous in general, and while at the same time so delicate, where she never looks settled or uncomfortable to the point that even her home seems like it doesn't have much personality, and I feel like that is purposeful. Oz Perkins really wanted that to be emphasized for her character. Nicolas Cage's uncaged and erratic style is smart casting and expertly fits the role, very much like his work in Mandy or pretty much anything else that he's in. Personally, I'm a bit of a Nicolas Cage naysayer, but his performance here was just so terrifying and sinister. It's almost more unsettling to physically see how much fun Nicolas Cage is having with a role this demented. Will he get awards for this role? Of course not. It's horror, and that curse will never be lifted off the genre, sadly. It was cool that Longlegs shared mirroring imagery with the Zodiac Killer. They both shared that they're killers with cryptic notes and religious-themed killings. The similarities of Silence of the Lambs and Seven aren't unnoticed as well, in that it feels like a riddle or puzzle, and to me, it's perfectly fine that its ending is a bit nihilistic. Longlegs feels like a very personal story, and it helps that Micah Monroe is constantly on screen alone, and very few times are any other characters really sharing screen time with her. But it keeps you invested in the story as you want to unravel the puzzle with her or catch anything that even she might not have seen. But also, thanks to the cast, you never feel like you can look away because every frame counts. There's a theme about family in this film, and this movie gives us multiple examples of what families look like. But in particular, Lee's relationship with her mom is really interesting because there's a sense of distance between them from the very first time they interact. Like that relative that you rarely ever see, but you really don't know how to interact with them. But despite that, I noticed that the first and only time Lee's character genuinely smiles is when she spoke with her mom on the phone. And so it made me want to keep learning about them, and I liked that the sacrifice her mom had to make to save her was definitely used as an emotional moment, but the movie also doesn't really try and sugarcoat it because you know it comes with detrimental consequences. As for the supernatural elements, it's great to see that yes, there's definitely supernatural elements here. It's so subtle and doesn't lessen the effectiveness of the narrative. Even before the reveals of the bigger aspects of the supernatural elements, there's a constant trend and question that she is just inhumanly intuitive, but it never feels like annoying convenience. This movie is smart and challenges you to question and think about her character, and it makes you want to learn that much more about Lee. Oftentimes, movies use aging or lighting to tell the audience there's a difference in time period between the scenes. And I love that the movie uses different aspect ratios and film versus digital to tell the audience this is the past and this is the current timeline. The perspective of the director is very clearly defined, and it makes you question how can this feel so personal and at the same time be so visceral. And regardless of if you're a Christian or a non-believer, this movie has a really strong way of leaving an impact to both sides. Mainly because the characters really believe, with reinforcement of evidence that shows what they believe in is real and true. The film does such an amazing job at creating the atmosphere and maintaining the tone, something that most other strong horror films usually focus in on one of the two elements. But not only does this movie expertly implement both elements, but one of the things that stood out to me the most about this film is that it emphasizes the stakes at play, something that in recent memory hasn't really been felt. It's quite interesting that as a consistent viewer of films involving deaths and murder, something that I know I'm not alone when I say this, you kind of become desensitized to that, and that's just because of the nature of the movies. However, this movie really makes the audience concerned for the lives of the soon-to-be victims, like when Detective Detective Carter gives exposition about all the victims' families, whether it was the loaded imagery of the crime scenes or the visceral details of the crimes, but it was so chilling and truly made Longlegs feel like the most nefarious villain in recent memory. Like, oh my god, the movie excelled at making you fear this man, even though in reality you don't see him that much. But that's the beauty of good writing. To create a presence that looms over all other characters despite not even being present is just unbelievable. In general, I wasn't expecting to feel so vulnerable and worried for the characters. And on the topic of expectations, I love that the movie took its time unraveling the story and puzzle, but depending on how you perceived the marketing and the trailers, I can see how most might not have expected it to be as slow as it was. Personally, for me, I loved the pace of this movie. It was very consistent, but I can see how this would have been an entirely different experience if your expectation was that it was going to be a slaughterbath at breakneck speed, because that's not what this is trying to be. And while it may not be a carnage fest, the gore here is gnarly and paralleling to Talk to Me. And just like in that film, the moments of gore are extreme and intense. But also in that same vein, this is the first movie in a while that left an impact, and not in like a terrified way, more so in an uncomfortable way. And I feel like if a movie is able to leave an impression on you after its runtime, then it fulfilled its job. And especially for horror, this year has produced movies that some were alright, but none have felt like they left their mark on neither the box office or audiences. And even though that I think this movie is fantastic, it sucks that more likely than not, this film won't do great at the box office for horror just because of its nature, despite the fact that the box office hasn't been doing great at all this year. But that's about it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe. My name's Anthony, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.